day of fall.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. It's like still high of 102 here, so it's like so weird to see that compared to being back home, because like when fall started, like we were still in Chicago, and then like obviously we left at the end of November, so we never really experienced fall here at Arizona. This is like your first fall like start. But you know what? It's been nicer like at night in the morning. Like this morning when I walked Pino, it was like 73 degrees or 74 degrees. It was like beautiful. It was like,
yeah.
Yeah, it does get chilly though. Like when it's like 74, like honestly, I could go out there with like pants or a light jacket on. I feel so fragile compared to someone like you probably like 74. That's like hot.
Oh, heck yeah, it's beautiful, buddy.
But you know what? I think people are saying like within the next couple of weeks, like it's gonna start to drop. People also say like it's like gets into the hundreds, and then all of a sudden like Arizona just drops to like the 70s or 80s, where it's like it like feels cold to like someone, but I don't know. It's kind of interesting how weather like starts off like 30 degrees cooler, and then it gets that 30 to it's like almost like 30 to 35 degrees, where it's like kind of like crazy on how weather can jump that high within a day, or low. So
I know, it is crazy, especially where like I've heard that in the desert it can get as hot as like 110, 120, and then nights can drop to like 50, 60. And like that's how people get like messed up if they like go camping in the desert for the first time, because they don't like prepare for it. They're like wearing like scantily clad clothing, like I brought plenty of sunblock, I'm good. And then they don't realize, and people die of hypothermia from that.
Yeah. I bet camping and like hunting. I bet. Oh, I guess people who hunt also camp. So I think Steve Rinelli went over it in one of the episodes of Meat Eater. So if you're interested, I think he does do like a couple of days out in Arizona, where like he hunts in the desert and whatnot. So if you're interested, go check it out. But episode 90. We are here. We are ready to keep going. Roman is out here. Him and I have got some really cool colors going on today. Like, if you're listening to this audio, like, I feel kind of bad for you, but like, I'm wearing this like bright yellow shirt, and Roman's wearing like a bright pink shirt. This wasn't planned, so. Thank you, Roman, for wearing a nice bright shirt today, because I don't shy away from colors. The funny thing is, I am also wearing like orange like sweat shorts. Roman, you've probably seen the shorts in like one of the, like my squat videos or whatnot. But I'm wearing actually orange shorts. So I honestly, like when it comes to like matching clothes, like I really don't care. Orange and yellow should match. I look like more of like shades of the sun right now, where I get, the sun could look yellow or orange compared to whoever's looking at it. But Roman, how are you doing? How are you doing today, buddy? How's lifting been going for you?
Man, it's going okay. I get some. I listen to the Fuad Abiyad podcast. It's like bro chat, and also he does, what's the other one he does? He's got some like amazing bodybuilders on there. Like when I was listening to today, like Roman Fritz, who's like, I think he's an Austrian guy, freaking massive. He's saying he's 290 right now.
Holy cow.
Brent Wilkin, who's like new to like the IFBB Pro, like at least like to going to shows, and like he's like, Brett's amazing. And then Guy Cisternino is on there. Guy just like retired, and then like Fuad.
Guy Cisternino, huh?
Yeah, he's like a 212 guy, or was, I guess he's retired now. But they like to call it niggles, like when they have like little like bumps and bruises. But my left elbow in particular has like kind of given me like some tendonitis, I guess is what I call it. So I've been kind of like working around, like messing with different like strategies, pretty much just like a hard deload is, I guess, the best way I'd put it. Whereas like I don't push as hard, or I'm like letting like off the gas quite a bit from what I usually do, just to kind of let it like calm down. And it's gone down like quite a bit. Um, so kind of a bummer because I was trying to really push this last like month, going into October and see if I could like how close I could get to that 185 by 8 on incline. And I know I'll get it at some point, but like there's a point to be said about like rushing progression, and like I've absolutely been trying to rush progression, and we've talked about that before. Is like what you tell your former self that like kind of like slow down and enjoy the process. Like you can still get a good pump in the workout. You can still get in a good workout without going to failure, like every single set, and like absolutely like driving progression to like the smallest like nth degree. Like people talk about Jordan Peters doing that a lot. He's like an amazing European bodybuilder, about like the same height as me, but like he'd get like 330 pounds, like an absolute freak of nature. Like if you see that guy's back, it's like a mile wide. Unbelievable
Yeah.
bodybuilder. He would do certain things like, or does do certain things because he's still going. He's a freaking madman. Where he'll just like add a pound. He'll add like the pound plates on each side just so he can eke out every inch of progression. Um, that's like phenomenal, but like realistically, he's an absolute freak of nature. He's like the 0.0000001% of like what the human potential is from like a bodybuilding perspective and like a muscle hypertrophy perspective. Like he's just like a living, breathing muscle. So
Yeah.
most people, I think, if you try to push that for too long, would like just like deal with injuries like all the time. So I just get some like little like nicks and bumps and bruises, which I'm trying to work through. But for the most part, I'm doing pretty good, I'd say. Yeah, it's my update.
I love it, buddy. Well, thanks for the update. Yeah, yeah. I mean, with me, same here with Roman. Lately, with losing weight, getting stronger is getting kind of hard, and pretty much like I'll let Roman and one of our buddies know on like a daily basis personally, like, hey, like hypertrophic movements sound so much better right now than powerlifting movements or like strength movements. It just building muscle or trying to maintain muscle as much as possible is going to be really hard. The beltless training is getting to that point where it's getting kind of like, kind of tough because of the fact that every week I'm like, oh, I'm going to put a belt on. I'm going to put a belt on. And then I actually left the belt out of my gym bag. So when I bring my gym bag, I don't even have that option anymore. I did have a little kink on my right upper back. When I think it had been from deadlifting. I experienced like some pain like last Wednesday and Thursday, and like the session before, I only did deadlifts, hack squats, leg extensions, leg curls, and calf raises. So I doubt it happened other than like hack squats or deadlifts, which hack squats I don't really go heavy on too much right now because it's just a newer movement for me, and I haven't really taken it serious like forever. So I had that issue like what's crazy? I went through all Wednesday like pretty much like painless, and then like Wednesday night before going to bed, I couldn't even like sleep on my right side. That's how like bad the pain was, and then like I don't know. And I was telling Roman yesterday, I think it was kind of like a cueing issue when it comes to like the lift itself as a deadlift. I think I warmed up too fast, and also when I was lifting, I felt like maybe my upper back wasn't tight enough as well. So as we've told you before on the deadlift, like you want to make sure everything's in groove, everything's tight, and everything is like stable. So yesterday I didn't do deadlifts. Usually I deadlift on Tuesdays. I just did some Romanian deadlifts with the barbell, and I was only the highest I went was 225 pounds, but the whole point was to keep it tight. So obviously an RDL is not the same as a regular deadlift, But, you know, in my head, in the movement itself, an RDL concentrates more on like the top half, and like obviously your hamstrings and your glutes are heavily involved, but you pretty much have to keep your upper back tight like the whole time throughout the movement. So I used that instead, and you know, it felt really nice, and I just pretty much focus on upper back tightness, make sure like, hey, don't ever lose sight of that. You know, even if even if you're deadlifting 365 for 5 reps with no belt, like, you know, make sure you're still cueing that in the back of your head. So I was doing that yesterday, and then yeah, I posted today, Wednesday, on Gainz podcast. I'm gonna start doing pull-ups again. Johnny Candido has inspired me, watching his latest couple videos about doing pull-ups. I don't know about weighted pull-ups. I'm probably just going to do body weight for right now, and then maybe down the road do weighted pull-ups. But I want to see what it does to my back. You know, I do quite a bit of volume on my back, but, you know, like I said, but I think in the last video, like, Roman and I usually don't worry too much about back volume, because like recovery is like pretty fast. Like, one day soreness and like the next day like my back feels like perfectly fine type deal. So it's like something that like we could both hit probably pretty high volume. But yeah, that's the update for me. We'll get right into the like the episode today, since you know, maybe we should, you know, stop doing such a long update with these episodes. But obviously, guys, you know, that's kind of like the style we don't really like to have like a routine, and it's kind of our style, which is cool. But episode 90 today, guys, we are talking about rep speeds within working out. Rep speeds is something that could be important to your performance. You could add into your current routine. You can add into your next routine. But before Roman starts going, what brings me to like first thought when it comes to like rep speeds, and like some people that like perfect it, like rep speeds, and like worked heavily on it for like a while now, is Juggernaut Training, like Chad Wesley Smith. He's done a ton of that work. I remember when I first like started listening to him. You know, he's grown as an individual like pretty wide. Like, he's been doing a lot within the fitness industry, and so is his athletes. But I think that came first in the mind, Roman, when you were telling me about that, because I remember like hearing him early on was like, that's how he became like a really good power lifter, how his athletes became good power lifters, when you throw in a bunch of variables and then throw in rep speed work within your daily or your weekly routine or your mesocycles and whatnot, and then you could grow from there. But Roman, start us off, baby. Let's do it.
Yeah, I like that. And from what I understand, Chad Wesley Smith came at it more from like a powerlifting and like a strength focus, which there definitely is like some carryover. It's absolutely like mind-boggling to me to see like some of these feats of strength that people like Greg Knuckles in like the Stronger by Science podcast that they'll talk about. Like, seeing their rep speed on like a 700-pound bench press, for example, is like absolutely unbelievable. Like, people putting up 700-pound benches faster than like I can like throw up like an empty bar for bench. And like, I don't have a bad bench press. Like, I could probably like max out at like 250, you know, and for like 170-pound like male, like, is that fantastic? No, but is that still probably like in the top percent? Yeah, like top 10%. Yeah, probably. So like seeing that kind of stuff is like so fascinating. And like obviously with like top end strength, you're talking about like, once again, like freaks of nature, like people that are just like absolutely like born and bred into like performing those types of like sports and those types of activities. So for the rest of us, like the question is like, can we benefit from them? And then I think we absolutely can. So wanted to talk to you about rep speed as a variable as it pertains to at least 3 different groups today. So the first group, probably the group that I align with the most, is like from a bodybuilding or a muscle hypertrophy standpoint. So rep speed is increasingly important as you develop like maturity and you become more and more skilled in bodybuilding, because you go from a point where rep speed doesn't matter all that much to where you really, really, really want to slow down the eccentric and explode through the concentric, especially for certain moves. Renaissance periodization does a fantastic job of describing this, and like helps to remind me sometimes too about like best practices when it comes to like a movement like the ham curl. The ham curl is such a straight movement. You flex your hamstring, you bring your ankle to your butt, and then you control the weight back down, then you bring your ankle back to your butt, and you do it for like desired rep range, or you go until failure or past failure, like whatever your program is calling for. So one thing that Dr. Mike Izzutel was talking about in RP video recently, which like helped to bring this up to me, like, yeah, of course, they were going over ham curls. And for a movement like that, the hamstring is a very fast twitch dominant muscle group. So what you want to do is you want to absolutely explode as hard as you can during the concentric, within reason and controlled. If you've never done it before, I recommend you slowly building up to it. Don't just like start wailing the weight around, because you might not be used to the eccentric and the backlash, especially if you're clanking on the weight. Like I don't like to clank on the weight because I think that like destroys the machine. So I go as hard as I can, but as controlled as I can, and I try to let up just a little bit before. And I know that, you know what, it's probably not maximizing my hypertrophy on that movement pattern, but I'd rather allow other people to use that machine for a period of time as opposed to break that machine. Like I'd feel really bad if I broke the machine. Like if it happens, it happens, but I don't want to knowingly break the machine, especially because like I'm getting to the point where I'm like getting close to like pushing the full stack, and like the more you do, the more like force you're putting, et cetera, all that stuff.
Roman just doesn't like full round. That's what he's saying. That was a big explanation right there. He doesn't like clanking.
I'm still going full range of motion, but like I'm cognitively like exploding as hard as I can, but the like amount of like pressure and like force that I'm applying onto the pad, like I knowingly decelerate that rate so that if it's gonna clank, it's just gonna like be like ding ding, as opposed to like clank clank clank, because like I'll do that with like lighter weight, and it's like, okay, take it down, like control the weight, because it's much more important to control the weight also, because if you don't do that, then you won't be able to control the eccentric. And the really important part about controlling the eccentric from a bodybuilding perspective, getting back on track, sorry about that, folks, is that you really want to eke out as much as you can. Like it doesn't have to be like a 10-second eccentric, but like 2-3 second eccentric, because that's where your satellite cells are able to sense the like through like the mechanosensors, etc., are able to sense the load, and that is like where movements are more damaging during the eccentric phase. But I do believe that that's where you're getting a large portion of the gains from a muscle hypertrophy standpoint, is during the eccentric phase. So you really want to eke out your hamstring coming back. So your hamstring comes up and then slowly back down, and then like the pause, and then comes up, and try and get a peak contraction. So squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. You're not going to be able to, mostly depending on like the rep range. So what's going to happen is you're going to see this, try and get that peak contraction and control the eccentric, and back up, control the eccentric. So that's the rate that it should look like for a ham curl. And I see like many people in the gym oftentimes are just kind of like wailing around the machine. That's fine if you're a beginner and you're just trying to learn it. But as you're trying to fine tune your craft, you're going to want to get more into that type of approach, so that you're applying as much stimulus to the muscle as possible, and that you're directing those forces into the muscle as opposed to potentially like into the knee joint or into the hip joint, et cetera, et cetera. So from a hypertrophy standpoint, rep speed is increasingly more important as you become more and more skilled in that endeavor. From a powerlifting standpoint, you don't necessarily want to slow the eccentric as much as possible, and you'll actually see on certain movements like the bench press, depending on like how much you're able to like sink the bar into your chest, for example, like a Jeff Nippard bench press, or the squat, you'll actually see almost a free fall at some point. So you'll see a controlling of the weight, a free fall, a pause in the case of the bench on with the bar on the bench, and then an absolute explosion off of the chest. So speed is extremely important on the concentric, and you want to develop as much speed as possible out through the sticking point, or up to and through the sticking point, to actually get yourself to that point, especially from a strength perspective, because you're going to be working most likely in like the 80+% of your 1 rep max zone when it comes to your strength work. Your speed work might be close to the 30 to 50% zone, and you might be trying to work that up. But from a strength perspective, rep speed is enormously important, because if you were to take a hypertrophy standpoint to powerlifting, for example, or from a strength perspective, what you'd find is that you're causing more stimulation of the local musculature that you're working on the squat. Say, for example, let's say you do like a 5 or 6 second eccentric as opposed to like a 2 or 3 second eccentric. Then what you're essentially doing is you're taking like all the different things like in your like intramuscularly, like your glycogen, for example, like creatine, like phosphate, whatnot, and you're causing all these different substrates to start to break, and you're firing as much as you can, like throwing as much ADP, all this energy, to being able to do this action. Whereas you need to control the eccentric from a strength perspective, absolutely. But the most important part from a strength perspective is a concentric, because you need to finish that concentric, right? Because if you don't, then if you're in a powerlifting meet, if you don't bring the squat all the way to the top, it doesn't matter if you bottom that thing out. If the bar crushes you, you don't get that count. You don't get those three white lights, and you can't count that lift. So like from a strength perspective, rep speed is enormously important. So what I'd encourage you to do is look at people like Dan Bell, look at people like Dan Green, various like other powerlifters, Johnny Candido, and watch how they control the weight through the eccentric, almost like allow it to like absolutely just bottom out, and then blast through the concentric as hard and as fast as they can. And then third,
real quickly, I forgot who was that bench like specialist like back in the day. So for the powerlifting side, I forgot his name, but he would tell you otherwise on the powerlifting side, because for the bench press, he thought the eccentric was more important than the concentric. I forgot who it was. Was it? I think Scott Mendelin or Mendelson.
Yeah, Mendelson. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. He said, so Roman might be fooling you, because if you're Scott Mendelson and you're talking about the bench press, he pretty much tells his athletes and himself that when you're pulling the bar down, he wants you almost think it's like you're like, you're gravitating all the strength with your lats, like you're pulling the bar to you instead of dropping it, and then you're pushing it off you. So it's like it's a weird way to think of it. Most beginner lifters won't understand what I'm talking about, because like when you're lifting heavier weights with bench especially, you could kind of feel what he's saying. It is a little weird understanding of the bench press, but then again, this guy, to my understanding, benches like well over like 500 for wet reps. So I mean, I'm not gonna say the guy is crazy, but I just wanted to throw that out there, like, because Roman did say, like, it's all about the concentric, but Scott Mendelson says, with the bench press, I don't know if he says it about every other like big 3 lift, but he always says like, you're pulling the bar into you. You're not dropping the bar into your chest.
Oh, no. You never want to drop it. Absolutely not. No, you don't want to go from a free fall. You absolutely want to control the weight. But correct me if I'm wrong, but go back and watch Scott Mendelson do one of his like 1,000 plus benches, because I think he's done over 1,100 pounds with a bench shirt. He does. He has like a really big arch, and he like does like have like kind of an odd way of like pulling the bar in. He says to like activate the lats and almost do like a row, like a row, right? Yeah. However, you'll notice he gets to a certain point where he's controlled it enough. He's just going to sink that thing into his chest. You'll notice that the rep speed changes. It's very, very slight. So you have to watch really close, and you'll have to watch it on repeat. But he does drop it. Why does he drop it? That's the question. The reason he drops it is he's trying to take advantage of the natural stretch reflex of the musculature that he's relying on to move the weight. So it's called the amortization phase. But essentially, like if you've ever skated in hockey, if you've ever like developed like decent skills enough on the ice, you like understand this principle, because what you try to do is nobody tries to come to a dead stop and then start. You try to come to a stop as you're starting to head this way. So a good skater will stop like this, whereas a novice skater will stop like this and start. So you see what's happening? You're altering your body's angle as you're coming in to stop, and you're already going. You're kicking off and you're going. Whereas you'll notice novice skaters will do this. They'll stop this way, and then they have to start again. Look at how they're heading. They head back out like this. They lean forward to skate out of it. It's very, very similar with the bench press. You want to take advantage of that very, very, very quick and short stretch reflex. So when you get the bar down, it's not a free fall, right? Not a free fall, but you're allowing almost close to it. You'll see the best powerlifters, they all do this when it comes to the bench press and the squat, not the deadlift. Deadlift is very, very unique in that perspective because it's all concentric, and you actually do have to show mastery or control of the weight down, typically speaking. Squat and bench press, you'll see like almost a full drop, and then like a good person to watch is Jeff Nippard, because Jeff Nippard he'll actually sink the bar into his chest, and what he's trying to do when he does that, he's trying to sink it deep enough into his chest so that the natural recoil of his chest, because the chest has a F ton of different muscles, ligaments, and tendons, which are all holding the rib cage to be able to maintain a certain structure for the lungs, right? So what Jeff Nippard tries to do is he tries to kind of game the system a little bit. It's really smart that he does this. So he sinks the bar into his chest, a little greater range of motion possibly than he would need to if he just touched his chest. But the advantage he gets is a little bit of whip off of his chest. And I'll even talk about it a little bit. So he sinks the bar into his chest, he gets a little bit of whip, which starts the process, and you just blast through the concentric. So it's really fascinating. I would say don't do it until you're a couple years into powerlifting, because it does take a certain like level of strategizing, and your first inclination is probably just going to be to bottom yourself out, and you're just going to fail the lift because the recoil is going to be so much so that you're just going to be like, what the heck, why didn't it work? Make sure you absolutely have a spotter when you do that. But yeah, taking advantage of the stretch reflex, you'll notice from a strength perspective, you can absolutely increase your rate of force development by doing that, and thus your concentric speed. But once again, why is that not good from a bodybuilding standpoint?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, what do you think, buddy? Why is that not good from a bodybuilding standpoint?
Well, because with bodybuilding, you're not really worried about that fast twitch when it comes to like strength. You're more worried about like the focus on the muscle itself. So like, like the bench press itself, it could be a bodybuilding movement. I mean, you see people like Colin Von Moger, Mike O'Hearn, they bench press all the time. But see, the thing is, you can take a look at someone like Jeff Nippard or Scott Mendelson, and you could compare like the bench press compared to like Colin Von Moger, where he's controlling that weight all the way through for both ends, where he's, grabbing it, making sure he's getting the movement towards his chest. He's stretching his chest out all the way. And then he might even like shortchange the range where he doesn't lock out all the way because he doesn't want any like the deltoid muscles working as much, but he wants to keep a contraction on the chest. So like another thing is like, I know we're not talking about movements, but like when you're benching as like a bodybuilder, you probably most likely, you won't necessarily need to like, put your traps on the bar. You won't need to, make sure your lower back's in, you're rounding your back. And also you might not even lock out, because what I found when I used to compete and never did powerlifting movements is sometimes I was shortening the range of motion on some lifts because I just didn't want to like release the tension on my muscle. So.
Yeah. So I think that like the jury's still out on like on time and attention, but like pretty much the point like I wanted to get to, which like you absolutely like touched upon and covered, which was awesome, is that from a powerlifting perspective, all you care about is getting the weight up. You just wanna complete the lift. But a bodybuilder, like in a way, it's so funny, but it's been like described, like I've been hearing it more and more described, like you almost want to lift inefficiently as a bodybuilder, meaning that like from a powerlifting perspective, you want to lift something like shortest range of motion you can. You want it to be like as like fast the lift as possible, like really blast the concentric. Going fast with concentric is very important in bodybuilding, but I'd say second to probably a slow and controlled eccentric. And that's because if I just bounce the bar off my chest, for example, just a little bit, but I know I can eke out one extra rep. What's going to happen? What's going to happen is I'm going to get more force that ekes out of my elbow. I'm going to get more tricep development inadvertently. And let's say like I don't mind getting a little bit of tricep activity. I actually really like it. I think my triceps get a lot of stimulus from pressing movements in particular, and I think that's kind of what's caused like the little like issues I've had in my elbows. But I'm not necessarily stimulating the pecs. I really want to focus on the pecs. I love that it hits my front delt. I love that it hits my tricep. I love that it even inadvertently sometimes works the forearms, depending on like how hard I'm like gripping the bar, etc. It's gonna be isometrically working the forearm flexors. However, when I do that, I'm misdirecting the stimulus, and that's a no-go from a bodybuilding standpoint. Bodybuilding, we want to make sure we know exactly where the stimulus is being applied. I want it to be as much in the chest as possible. The triceps, the front delt, the forearms, that's just icing on top of the cake, okay? So this is like really important to think about this and like even get into like the philosophy behind it, because it will make you a better lifter. It'll make it so that like you don't have as many injuries and as little like bumps and bruises, etc. And then how are we?
Yeah, as I say, we're short on time. Did you have I think you said you had 3 populations. Well,
yeah.
Do you want to quickly go over that, and then we can?
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to maybe start off the next one, kind of finishing this out or whatever. But it doesn't matter. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah. So a third population that I think that that speed is like really important, or rep speed is really important to think about, is from like an athletic development standpoint. So that's where people are really going to want to start. You're going to want to start light, really, really light, like 30% of your 1 rep max. And you're going to want to control the eccentric. That's important. But the most important is the concentric, the explosive part of the movement. You're going to want to blast through it as fast as you absolutely can with control. Make sure you're not like jumping out of a squat, for example. It should be controlled on the way up, because you don't want the bar to jump off your back and come back down and give you some type of a like back injury or whatever. So for that population in particular, you're going to see a immense carryover from speed work, and that's typically starting at like 30 to 50% of your 1 rep max. So if you haven't tried that before, I'd highly recommend it if you're looking to increase your vertical jump, increase your horizontal jump, or like depth jump.
I was gonna say one of the horizontal jumpers, or is that horizontal jumpers? I forgot who it was, but I think they were like Olympic status. They showed like their workout routine, and they pretty much were doing like halfway squats, so like just above 90-degree angle, and they pretty much started from the bottom, but they would pretty much either they would just pretty much stand up and squat the weight, stand up, squat the weight, stand at that position as fast as possible, but as controlled as possible too, to help them, get that jump off the ground, and build that thickness and performance.
Yeah, absolutely, buddy.
So pretty much recap, as Roman said, bodybuilding, powerlifting, and like performance for athletes. So one last thing I wanted to say, because Roman did talk a lot about pretty much about all 3 of them, which is like pretty great information, is so when you're doing this training, obviously this might not be for beginners, but if you like one of the styles, like maybe try to learn that style of training with the rep speeds. Also, too, for people that are trying to build their game up in this world or like build up their sport, you probably want to concentrate on lifting like that if you want to be best in that sport. So if you're a bodybuilder, powerlifter, or athlete, you would probably want to focus on the three. And it's one last thing before we say goodbye is it's crazy on how many little things are in like the lifting world, because like rep speeds is like probably something when you first start lifting is like something you don't really pay attention to, because like when you're doing like a bicep curl or a bench, you're just like worried about like doing a lift and like doing it safely. So like it's like crazy that we're taking another step deeper into like the actual lifting itself and the categories around like an actual repetition. So awesome, guys. Well, we're on all audio and video platforms. Please like us on YouTube. Please subscribe to Roman's channel. Subscribe to my channel. Make sure you comment on the YouTube to see if you want us to talk about anything else. Go to our Instagram, follow us on Gainz Podcast on Instagram, and then leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts. And we'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.